Hi everybody, you're very welcome back to Law Hero. It is Law Hero talking about FE1. I just realised that FE1 2026 will be 13 years of Law Hero. So that is crazy. 13 years of FE1. Who would wish that on their worst enemy? But today's video is going to be succinct. Okay, property law I've written down. You get 2 questions on succession. It is unbelievable to me the amount of people who failed property law in the last sitting because they didn't understand the rules around capacity or testamentary freedom. They didn't understand the principles of interpretation. These are legal right share. It's just, you cannot skip that. You have to understand it. You are going to fail the paper if you don't. It's 2 questions out of 5 you're going to answer on succession law. Also, I think it's very, very interesting how the finding question, people are always putting in about the National Monuments Act. That is not relevant if it is not an artefact that is linked to the state. Do not mention the National Monuments Act if it is not a treasure of the state. It's irrelevant. And it comes back to, again, people just throwing down their notes to show that they're smart. It doesn't work. Usually adverse possession will be an advice question, or it'll be how can the law be reformed. It'll either go one or 2 ways. So that is a question that comes up the odd time and is very, very, it's a good question. The family property one, I would say, is a lot where people fall down. They don't understand Section 3 consent. They don't understand how the law has evolved to bring in same-sex couples. They don't understand how the law has evolved to bring in cohabiting couples. That is just unforgivable in a property law exam. I haven't seen a lot of people fail tort, but if they do, in my experience, people fail tort again because they vomit everything out that they've learned on a topic. And again, just like contract law, the examiner hates that. So I would say with tort law, especially because the essay questions are quite lofty and idealistic, make sure you do the problem questions. I don't really have any massive tips for tort. I think like one that I would always do is vicarious liability. I would always look at nuisance. Those 2 tend to come up. I would always look at torts against the person. That always comes up in some shape or form. And negligence then is probably about 2 questions, be it just straight negligence or professional negligence. It'll always be roughly about 2 questions. So it's not a predictable paper because, you know, in fairness to the examiner, he does put a good effort in making it interesting, but he definitely rewards structure. Raymond Freed definitely rewards structure. Okay, so company law, I've written down directors. So directors' duties plus restriction orders come up every year, and the examiner can spin them in loads of different ways. So what's the definition of a director? Usually shadow directors, enforcement and consequences. That's just automatic. You have to know that for company law. Answer like you're advising and not describing, because Tom Courtney is very, very annoyed when people don't hit the nail on the head and give succinct advice. So for problem question, identify who owes what duty, what the breach is, what the remedy is, then apply that to the problem question. Don't dump down your lurid notes. That just drives him insane. And then the last one I have is have a core statutory spine, which means if you can't anchor answers in the Companies Act, you drift. Everything comes back to the Companies Act. So build a mini checklist, which is what is the trigger, what is the test, or what is the section, what are the key cases, what is the remedy. For constitutional, my first tip is that you understand constitutional interpretation as the lens through which judges adjudicate on constitutional law. So understand the interpretive approaches and show the examiners that you understand also constitutional principles. The next one is a structure to your answer. So a lot of people get bogged down in constitutional law because it's quite dense, but a structure would be, what is the right? What is the constitutional right? Does the person have standing? Is there interference? Is there a justification of, so what's the interference of the right? How can that right be justified? For example, COVID was justified for public health reasons. And what is the remedy? So what is the judicial or constitutional remedy? if you skip parts of this, you're going to just lose all your structure. And then the next one is mixing is normal. Stop trying to predict one topic per question. FE1 students have an awful habit of doing this, but life isn't so cut and dry. There's always multiple aspects to questions. So prepare to link fair procedures with remedies or property rights with proportionality. There's always going to be constitutional principles mixed in with constitutional rights. Out of all the exams, when it comes to FE1 contract, this is the one where if you do not plan, you are going to be penalised. So what I always say is plan first, write second. And a lot of people don't have the discipline to do this, and then they end up, coming to me with a 42% script. And I'm like, you didn't plan your answer. You knew the law, but you didn't plan your answer. So take the pause, get a cleaner answer, and less is more. When it comes to problem question, the examiner really does love to mix issues. You just cannot get away from it. And that's where the discipline in the organization of the question comes in. Like, are you going to separate your consumer remedies from your contractual remedies? Are you going to be disciplined enough to break out the issues? Because that's what the true skill of a lawyer is. And again, more than anything, the structure around ILAC is just pivotal for contract law, especially now that the paper's gone very much like a problem question paper. On criminal, I don't have much to say, but just when it comes to your offences, actus reus, mens rea, and proof, obviously for strict liability, you don't need mens rea, but you just really need to apply that to the facts, and that will give you your structure in criminal law. Remember as well, there's no codified statute in criminal law, but it is very, very important that if you are doing the 97 Act, or if there are sexual offences, for example, that you are on the ball when it comes to your sections, and that you know the development of case law, and then you're able to apply it to the problem question. And the last really large piece around criminal law are criminal law defences, and then the procedure. Those two come up as well every year. So that's criminal law. Right, so equity. Equity is one I have been reviewing a lot from the October sitting. A few people failed equity. I think part of it is just not understanding the definition of a trust, not understanding CPRE jurisdiction, not understanding how a charitable trust is different, and why it's so important that the elements of a charitable trust are there, and why people want it to be charitable. It's for tax reasons. It makes sense. So yeah, I would say charitable trust, CPRE, and non-charitable purpose trusts, just make sure you have them perfect. Do not skip on that. When it comes to equity, it really, really helps to define first. So like define what a half secret trust is, define certainty of objects, and words of intent, define the elements, the certainties. It's very, very important that you use, like for donatio moris causa, define what it means, or trustee duties, define, and then apply. Because I think a lot of people get lost. What I've seen is a lot of people get lost along the way when they're trying to refer back to what they're talking to. And as well, a lot of people don't understand the concepts. I think that's a big problem in equity. And I think the last one I would say as well is, if a problem question doesn't give you all of the detail you need, so it's very, very important that you say, I am assuming this, or, because examiners like that realism, that and that happens a lot in contract law as well. Sometimes you don't have all the facts, but it looks like something else. Just make sure that you're calling out the assumptions. I personally think EU is a very, very straightforward exam paper. For example, you will always get a question on institutions. You will always get a question on freedom of movement of goods, be it Article 110 or Article 45. You will always get a question on competition law, either 101, 102, or State Aid 106. you'll always get them. Like, there are certain questions that are just bankers, and EU is excellent for that. I always say make sure you avoid the case law question. It is an awful question. People never do well in it. I've never seen it answered well. And I would say as well, like, use in your head like a pathway. So if it's like direct effect, or it's judicial review, that you're like, okay, this, then this, then this is what it takes to have that test under European law. And I would say in European law as well, because there's so much case law from the CJU, you don't have to learn it all. I would be strategic. I would learn 3 or 4 of the most important ones, like Van Ganden, Luz, Factor Tame, Cassis de Dijon. They're like off the top of my head that I've just seen. But just learn the ones that are very, very important. British Gas is another one. Rather than trying to do them all.